Hello, and everyone, welcome to the Women's Football Spotlight podcast. Myself, Dan Conway, and my co-host Ross Balloch here for another week, game week 3 of the WSL and talking points, and we'll touch on the Man United Champions League win against Brighton, and we'll go on to the other games, key games and results. But firstly, let's start with a sad point, really. Matt Beard, Ross, the passing of Matt Beard. How are you feeling about it? What are your thoughts this kind of last week since it was announced?
It's a really sad thing for women's football. Obviously, we've made any secret of our Liverpool loyalties. So he both times as Liverpool manager, he won 3 league titles for Liverpool. Not many Liverpool managers, male or female, teams can say that. But yeah, it's obviously very sad. He was a huge character in the women's game. Had been there since the beginning, really, and had kind of helped women's football go through that transition from, semi-professional amateur, really, to full professional. I think it's sad that he probably should have had a crack at England manager, I think, particularly after Mark Sampson. I think Phil Neville did an okay job as Lioness's manager, but for someone like him who'd been involved in women's football for so long, to be passed over for somebody who had never coached, who'd never been a manager at a club, really, and had never worked in women's football at the time, I think that was probably, looking back now, you'd say that was really unfair on him. But obviously, you feel so many players in the WSL now and recently retired would have worked with him or around him. And obviously, Sunday was really difficult, and saw the Liverpool game against Villa that was postponed, as was the Burnley game, because obviously he was on gardening leave from them. And obviously, we had spoken about him last week, talking about how tough it can be for managers at women's clubs who don't get paid the same as men. And he'd spoken quite openly with The Athletic about how hard he was finding it being out of work, and not just because he wasn't working, but obviously like the financial strain that brings. So yeah, really shocking and sad news for the entire game.
Yeah, you can tell he had such an impact on a lot of the players. Like, he was a bit of a pioneer in the women's football at the WSL. Obviously, like I said, he's won 2 league titles, he had promotion. So this guy, three
3 league
league
titles.
titles. And I always feel like for Matt Beard, he was an overachiever. He's the sort of manager to get the best out of a squad. He could get them playing, achieving more than, when you look at that squad, evaluate it, you think, oh, they should finish this place. But he always overachieved the teams and the squads he had. And I think that's a testament to kind of the type of coach he was. And he was very much, by all accounts and all the responses and testimonies that we're hearing of people, what he was like as a character. He was clearly a people person, the sort
Yeah.
of person that had put his arm around your shoulder, cheer you up. It's been phenomenal. Normally, it's been phenomenal to see the response. Normally, you can, it's always sad, but you can tell he was very popular, really liked, because the the volume of people that have come out and praised him and said, what an impact he had in their careers and lives it's been astounding, really. And I hope his family can see that positive side and how he helped these people's lives in such a positive way.
Yeah, I think for me, I think a few things stand out. Firstly, you could see he genuinely had a real good eye for talent.
Yes.
Farrah Williams spoke to the BBC about how he had that belief in her ability. She said probably before she had that belief in her ability. She went on, I think, more than 100 caps for England. And just if you look recently, Olivia Smith, not a name that was linked with very many clubs. And I think a lot of people were quite surprised at how much Liverpool pushed the boat out for her financially to get her in. But she's gone after a year for £1 million. And so, you could probably go through his entire career and find examples, but obviously clearly, so what stands out for me is his eye for talent. And then in terms of the person, I was very lucky. Early in my coaching career, my niece played at Bristol City, and the first team were playing against Liverpool when Matt was there in his first stint. And my niece's coach actually introduced me because he knew I was a Liverpool fan. He knew I was getting into coaching, and I was lucky enough to have a very, very brief conversation. But before a game, he didn't need to give me that time at all and ask me about my coaching and, and answer some of my questions. He didn't need to do that. And so for me, when I saw all those very personal tributes from players and staff and coaches around the league, that struck a chord with me just because of the very short experience that I had with him. But like you said, it kind of just rang true, just because I had experienced that firsthand. So like you have a great deal of sympathy for his family and his friends at this time. Yeah, you really, you really hope, just for the best for them, and you just hope that anybody who needs to can get the help required to kind of get them through this time, especially those that were close to him.
I think Natasha Dowie came out and said something really positive and was really, really praiseworthy, really lovely. She said about Matt Beard, and I'll quickly share it. So Natasha Dowie played with Matt Beard for 4 clubs.
Yeah.
That just shows you how much of a good coach he must have been. Because if you come across one bad coach and you're with him just a matter of months, you think, I'm not playing for them again. But the fact that she travelled with him for 4 different clubs just shows you that he was, he knew how to get people on board. And I'll show you what she said. I'll read it out. She said, Matt Beard made you feel like the best football player in the world. She said, he knew me as a person. He knew I would run through a brick wall for him, and I would. I would do anything for him because he was the type of manager that made you feel like that. And I think that's just a really lovely statement to sum up what he was like as a character and coach. So thank you, Matt Beard, to everything you did for women's football. And it really wouldn't be the place it is now without, his management, his time, and his impact on the game.
Definitely here in England, yeah.
Yeah. So okay, let's move on to game week 3 then. I've got an order. There's been some good results, and surprisingly, Chelsea are at the bottom of our talking point, which is unusual. But I've just briefly wanted to touch on the Champions League. So Man United were 1-0 down in the away leg, but then at home they won 3-0, so won 3-1 aggregate against Norwegian side Brann. And in fairness, there's a couple of points I wanted to... Like Elizabeth Turland. And Ross, I'll come on to your thoughts on her in a moment, but she got a hat-trick. And I feel like sometimes there's some big iconic players that get the headlines, and I feel like she's quietly sometimes goes under the radar. I wouldn't say underrated. So I think anyone that follows the WSL will know that she did it at Brighton when she wasn't necessarily a name, and she caught the eye and obviously got her move to Man United. But I do think she goes underrated, maybe underrated. Thoughts on Turland, Ross, from the last year or two and a couple of years in the WSL?
I think as we've probably seen from the women's Ballon d'Or this week, that unfortunately there are those players that are maybe just not household names enough that they don't get the kudos that they deserve. For me, you rather than speak about her individually, like man as a collective. Obviously now they've got through to the Champions League proper this year. That's 3 English teams in the competition. I think that's a really good thing for the WSL. I think that's a really good thing for women's football here in the UK. But yeah, with players like her, Jess Park, it's weird. I actually find it quite funny that maybe kind of year and a half ago there were Man United fans at games with fake, P60s for Mark Stinner, and there was a section of fans that really were quite vociferous in their opinions of wanting him out. But I think they're really starting to cook now, and I think the loss of Clinton is, and I don't think right now Jess Park is going to be anywhere near the same type of player, but they've got a good squad there, and with talents like her putting the ball in the back of the net, you hope that they can do something despite the tough draw that they've got. What are your thoughts on kind of where you think they could?
Yeah.
What could they achieve in the Champions League this season?
I think they'll compete. I like if I'm being realistic, I would love them to go. Obviously, as an English club, I'm one of these people that I would love to see any English club, regardless if it's my club or not, to go as far as possible because it's great for the English league and it's great for the WSL and attracting the best talent and growing the league.
Mm.
I think where Man United's strength lies, they've got an incredible goalkeeper, Tullis Joyce,
Yeah,
so she can have massive impact on keeping clean sheets. If you look at their attacking forward, they've got four wicked forwards. You've got uh, Elizabeth Turland, Ella Toon, Jess Park, Mallard. So you're right. When they cook, and you're starting to see the glimpse of that so far this season, that if those four can stay fit, if they can be on form, I think they've got every chance of having a really good run. And I would love it for Man United fans and for English fans as a collective.
yeah.
What about you? What do you think realistically? What do you think Champions League?
Obviously, the new format they've gone to. I don't know why, but it just seems to be the thing that we do is they've gone to mirror the men's format. I've got no idea who thinks that's a good idea. Obviously, with that new format, means there's more games. There's a greater chance of possibly getting through to the knockout stages. I think their draw is quite tough. The games that they've been drawn out, so I think that's probably that, along with the fact that they've. I can't remember the last time they had a real solid run in Europe, if they have at all. It's really sometimes you forget that the club isn't that old, the team isn't that
Yeah.
old, and that established yet. Obviously, as a franchise or brand, if we want to use that term that I know a lot of football fans don't like, they are, because Manchester United is a huge brand. But their women's team isn't that old. So whilst they do have those good players and a good squad, they've got a tough draw and coming up against teams who've probably got a bit more experience in the Champions League, and I think that is what may count against them.
Okay. No, fair enough. Interesting point. Okay, let's move on to first game I've got is Everton 1, London City Lionesses 2 of their first win in the league campaign. What are your thoughts on that game, Ross?
I felt overall, I think Everton were a little bit hard done by. I thought that for London City Lionesses, with the money that's been spent, I think it was important for them to get that win as quickly as possible. They don't look like the most exciting team in the league to watch. Yeah, for me, I think we've said from the beginning, I think they'll be fine. I think they'll probably challenge for a top four, maybe top five spot in the league. They had a tough start, Arsenal away, and it was good for them to get that win away at Everton. I think that's a really good sign to be able to go away to Goodison and to take 3 points. But yeah, I do think it's not the most exciting team to watch, and I do think Everton were quite unlucky not to come away with some.
I think, to be fair, what I thought was positive, you're right. The London City Lionesses' first win is going to hopefully kickstart their league campaign properly, where it will give them that confidence that they really needed from that first 3 points. But you could see in
Yeah.
that game, well, you're right, you could see in that game, you can tell it's a new team that are trying to bed together, to gel in it. It's going to take time.
Yes.
You've suddenly got a mixture of all these brand new, high quality players, but now they've got to try and get that team gelled together and playing as a team. You can have 11 fantastic players, but they might not even be a team, but they need to start playing as a team. But you could see glimpses in the Everton win, an away win. You could see glimpses of the quality of the players. So I think it's positive and optimistic. What I did like and what did stand out was Isabel Goodwin, their forward. Now, she was with them last campaign when they got promoted from the championship. And what's positive of her, like her statistics from a championship last 2 years look positive. She had 16 goals in 19 appearances, which bodes well for a striker. She's 5'11". She's pace, so she's got height, and she got a brace at the weekend against Everton. So, and the season before, she had 15 goals in 24 appearances, and she's only young. So, she's one to watch. I'd love to see a young English talent, another forward, come through the ranks and do a really good job and establish herself as a WSL top striker. But
Yeah.
we'll see early days.
I think that's where players like Nikita Paris will be really, really important for them. They've got that WSL experience, and I think you make a really good point. Like I said, they don't to me look like the most exciting team in the world, but I don't know if that's because 75% of their squad's different. It's a new manager as well. That's all going to take time. But obviously, there are players in there that do have some WSL experience, some high level experience, and some of them have obviously not had like pre-season altogether as well, and so as those players come back in, they'll be fine. Like I said, for me, I agree with you about Goodwin. It'd be great to see any player, English or not, but in her case, a homegrown player who has kind of come up through the leagues a little bit. I mean, it's surprising to me that after her first season of 15 goals and the second season of 16, I think you said, like, why maybe a club in the WSL wasn't willing to take a little chance on her. But I think what London City Lionesses do have is, there's a great, they've got an owner who's got money, who's willing to spend. They've got their individual identity, not being attached to a men's club. And obviously they're able to pay a decent salary, and so maybe that's a factor in it. For me, I'd just like to see as all the new players kind of gel and make their come a bit more in sync with each other in terms of patterns of play and shape. Will there be some kind of evolution for them? Or because for me, that just both games I've seen so far, they look very strong on set pieces. And I'm quite happy to take a lead and sit back and look to hit teams on the break. And, for me, like I said, I would like to see, will there be some kind of evolution in that through the season as these bigger names, more experienced players kind of settle into both the league and the team?
Yeah, I think they'll start to cook once they get that formula right. But you make a really good point on Nikita Paris. Her experience has already been vital. She got an assist for one of Isabel Goodwin's goals, and in the previous game, she scored. So Nikita Paris, 1 goal, 1 assist, starting the season. It's really positive, and she's a great player of attacking talent. So that experience is going to be vital for that team to succeed this season. Okay, next game I've got Tottenham won at home, lost 5-1 to Man City. So you're one of your favourites for Gino, scored an absolute top bin finish. What did you think of the well, a big loss for Tottenham, but what did you think of a great 5-1 victory for Man City?
Yeah, they looked really, really good. Spurs looked completely toothless, if I'm honest with you. Didn't look like they have really any way of punishing teams. You and I are both big fans of Beth England. We know that she will score goals if you give her the opportunity. I think what worries me is that already doesn't seem to be getting those opportunities. And actually, for me, I think what really stood out at the end of the game in terms of Spurs was how, I think, disappointed, maybe even angry Martin Ho was. I think he felt, as I did watching, that a lot of Man City's success came from mistakes that Spurs made as individuals, as a team. But what I won't take away, for me, probably the individual performance of the weekend was Carolyn, who wasn't even starting the game. Like, Lauren Hemp had to go off very early, and she came on. And Carolyn just gave the right hand side of Spurs an absolute torrid time with her movement, her skill, her pace. I thought, for me, that was the best individual performance of the season, and she looks frighteningly good for a player who, like I said, wasn't in the starting 11. If Hemp's going to be out for any period of time, obviously that's not good for City or for the Lionesses, because she's a great player. But for City in Carolyn, they've got a player who, I'll not say that they won't miss Hemp, but she will be more than capable as cover. But yeah, I thought hers was the best individual performance of the weekend in the WSL. I thought she had Tottenham on toast.
I think you raised a really good point with Karen. The last 2 games, I watched her against Brighton as well. She came in. She's exactly the sort of player a coach wants. If you're not starting, you want those players on the bench to be proving to you why they should be starting.
Yeah.
and she did exactly that. She came on against Brighton and had a real good impact, and she came on in this game and had an even bigger impact. You're right, she terrorised with her pace, her trickery. She looks a real asset, and as a testament to, and this as a Man City squad, and this is why you need a good squad, because like injuries like him, vital, amazing player, do happen. And who have you got? Man City have got Carolyn, who can step up hopefully and perform well in Hemp's absence.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
mean,
great goal. Go on.
I was going to say, City scored 5 goals, managed to miss a penalty and a couple of other chances as well. But like I said, I think for me, what really stood out was, as well as her individual performance, Carolyn's individual performance, was just how easy it looked for City. And I think, like I said, Martin Ho didn't look best pleased and didn't sound best pleased in the post match interview. And I think that will be, I think as a coach, that is always the most disappointing thing. Individual errors, you've got to be able to react to them in a way. I think City were 3-0 up at half time. Like I said, missed a penalty, missed a couple of other chances. And, like I said, it was easy, but I don't think we're particularly surprised by that. I think we probably always felt that they, along with kind of United and London City, were probably going to battle for that fourth, fifth, sixth spot. Third, fourth, and fifth, because, Chelsea and Arsenal are just so much further ahead than everybody else. But kind of they were, for me personally, they are the next 3 teams to kind of battle it out for that final Champions League spot. And obviously we talked about new manager at City again this summer, not a household name or necessarily an appointment that people were expecting. And so it, like London City, it's slightly different in the sense that like the player turnover smaller, but there's still some changes there to be made. This is what, third week of the season, and it looks as though things are starting to kind of gel together quite nicely for them. So yeah, I think that will give them real confidence. Like I said, for that battle for that kind of third spot. Spurs, I won't worry about them yet. But yeah, I just really disappointing. I think is probably a good way to kind of describe the performance that I saw.
I think that's a good summary. I think it's worth pointing out 2 points actually. Grace Clinton. So
Mm-hmm.
she scored her first goal, which gave her confidence, but about a couple minutes later gave away a goal. So her back pass led to the Tottenham getting in and scoring their goal. But
Great finish though.
yeah,
Like it's one thing like intercepting the ball or winning the ball. Is it Holt? Yeah, Holt was still kind of 25, 30 yards out and had to put it in the back of the net. Yeah, I mean, if I'm Grace Clinton, I wouldn't be too worried about that. I think by that point, I think City just found it so easy that they were just pushing so hard to try and score more goals. City that it was just a bit of a brain fade, but the game was gone by then, so I wouldn't be too worried. Yeah, I mean, it's not nice to get the first goal, but really it's just people like you and I that talk about. I'm sure she's not. I'm sure she doesn't care about what
you
Dana
can
Ross
well.
think about on women's football spotlight or whether she's got her first goal or not. And it was a huge deflection as well, so I don't think it's going to go down particularly as like one of her in her highlight reel. But yeah, it's when I think it probably makes it a bit easier that like money, like there's no transfer fee attached because from what I can gather, it's kind of a straight swap with her and Jess Park. But I think more than anything, I think what people will look at throughout the season is like where Man City are using her in terms of her position and how often is she in the starting 11. It's easy at the start of the season to go, bedding her in, didn't have pre-season with us, it was a deadline day deal, we'll start on the bench to see what happens. But if we get 9-10 games into the season and she's still not starting, I think that's where people might start wondering. But again, probably just people like you and I, how good a move is that really for her? At such a young age still, 22, I think,
Yeah.
Clinton, you want to be playing every week. and there's a lot of competition in that centre midfield. Gino, I think she's a great player. She was very, very good again. Scored one on the penalty, but yeah, it's early days. I think you got to reserve judgment on that. Like I said, it's nice that she got the goal, but it won't be in her personal highlight reel, I'm sure, because it was, not anything particularly special. The goal, yeah, I'm looking forward to see kind of how she fits into that team, that
Yeah, me
squad,
too.
really.
How it evolves, how a position evolves. But speaking of goals, Bunny Shaw. So 3 league games in, 1 goal,
3 league games in, only 1 goal, absolute
1 goal.
disgrace. Seller.
Technically, when we're recording, they've had 4 games, including a League Cup game. 1 goal. Is compared to Bunny Shaw heights, she does seem to be. She hasn't hit the form that we know she can hit. She doesn't look at her best. Anything to be concerned about yet?
Not for me, no. You don't become a bad player. I think it's really easy to forget kind of how serious her injury was last season, how much of the season she missed, and I think still was the second or third top goal scorer of the league. For me, my kind of rule of thumb is it takes a player as long as they were out injured to get back to their best. And I think it's harder in the women's game to get that momentum going because the calendar is so different and there are such fewer games than in the Premier League to the WSL. That's why if you get off to a bad start on the WSL, it can really affect your season because all of a sudden you could be kind of 3-4 games into the season and going, well, it's a quarter of the season gone. You really got to start making up points quickly because there isn't a lot of games, and so I'm not particularly fast. Like I said, I think it will take her time to get back to where she was because of the significance of the injury. I'd probably say the same about Sam Kerr. The difference is, I don't think anyone yet has laid on a goal from 2 yards out for Bunny Shaw. But yeah, and obviously City don't have European this season. They're going to have even fewer games. And so I think by halfway through the season, she'll be motoring again a little bit. I would still expect her to kind of be in the running for a top goal scorer in the league, but it will just take some time for her to get back from the injury. It's the injury, but again, new manager, new teammates. That will just take a little bit of time. I wouldn't be worried if I was her or anybody within that Man City team, just because all it takes is one. And with her, one can come 5 and 6 really, really quickly.
I think you're right. I think by midway through the season, I think we'll see her back at her best.
That's probably really boring for you, isn't it? You're like, anything we should be worried about? Yeah, get rid of her. And then I'm just like, nah, not
You only
really.
speak
It doesn't
sense.
make for great. It doesn't make for great TikTok content, does it?
Well, I think people like to hear people speaking sense, and sometimes you speak it. Right.
Sometimes, wow.
Brighton 4, West Ham 1. Quite a big victory for Brighton. I know you watched this game. Thoughts on it?
Best game of the weekend. Brighton are a very, very, very good team. And I said to you before we start recording, it's best game of the weekend. And you were like, really? Here's what was the best game of the weekend, okay? There were 30 shots in the game. 16 of those shots were on target. Combined, there were 70 touches inside the 18-yard box. There were 10 saves made by either goalkeeper, and the post and the crossbar was hit, and there was a clearance off the line. It was a really, really good game, and Brighton were very, very good value for their win. I thought West Ham were poor, particularly in terms of playing out from the back. I don't know how much of that was maybe affected. Ryan Skinner's come out since and said that obviously we spoke about Matt Beard, and he was manager there and had worked with a lot of those players. She's come out this week and said that perhaps more of the games should have been postponed on Sunday, if not all of them. So I don't know how much of that is affected in terms of emotion, mindset, psychological. But Brighton were just pressing really, really high, really, really aggressively. West Ham couldn't see where the overload was, and they were losing balls inside their half, a lot. But I want to give credit to Vidosic, the Brighton manager. I think he's one to keep an eye on. Really, really impressed with how he's got them playing this season, and also for me, they've got Kirby in the squad, but also they've picked up Kafaji from Arsenal on loan, both of whom were exceptional at the weekend. Like, Kirby's just a really, really clever player who, admittedly, I thought maybe kind of not was finished, but I felt that when she first came onto the scene, I remember watching her play for England, kind of one of her first games against Wales, and think to myself, she is already better than kind of like in terms of like technique. You could see that there was a big difference between her and some of the older Lionesses players at the time. And I felt that it was you could see she was clearly like part of a new generation of players coming through. And I think maybe 2-3 years ago, I probably felt the same thing about Toon, Clinton, those that have come after her, the generation after her. And I thought maybe like go to Brighton, wind down a career a little bit. But she is such a clever player. The position she takes up off the ball, her movement was really, really good. And her and Kafaji linked up really, really well. And oftentimes looked to kind of be swapping position, and that was causing a real headache for West Ham. Those two in particular were excellent, but 4-1 the score, and Brighton had a lot of chances, like both teams did, but for me, West Ham never really looked like they were gonna get over the fact that I think they were maybe 2 down at half time. And you could see it was just probably going to be a bridge too far, but it was a really, really entertaining game to watch. And when there is an entertaining game to watch, it takes two to tango. That's you've got to kind of say fair play to both teams. You get frustrated when you watch and you see those mistakes being made, but those mistakes can lead to exciting moments in the game. And so, for me, the way I kind of look at it is, are mistakes being made, or is the other team doing something so well that they're forcing mistakes? And for me, I felt probably, particularly in the first half, a little bit more West Ham were just making silly mistakes and not quite figuring out how to play through Brighton. It also made me wonder, like, what if you're not able to play through just for 5 minutes, why not just go long? Just get everybody and not risk the ball inside your half. But, obviously coaches have their tactical models and they have their principles, and the players stick to it because that's what professional players do. Whether they agree with it or not, you tend to stick to a game plan. But there was a moment in the first half where there was, I think it might have been a head injury to someone. I do wonder if maybe a senior player at West Ham could have maybe had a conversation with the coaches and said, I think maybe for 10 minutes we should do something a bit different rather than keep trying to play through. But like I said, those mistakes made for a really entertaining game.
Yeah, no, the possession was about bang on 50-50 each. And you're right, there was loads of shots, and you're right, it was great entertainment value.
Yeah.
I've got a similar point. Frank Kafaji scored a cracking long range goal, but you're right, she was terrorising West Ham's defence. But Frank Kirby, she's really coming into her own. When she played against Man City, even though she played one half, the impact when she weren't playing was significant. And she's at the tempo and the heart of everything Brighton do in that midfield as they're going forward. She's like that linchpin. She gets goals, she gets assists, but she's that final pass before. She's the last pass before the assist. I mean, she's at the heart of everything good going forward. It's great to see her performance so well.
Great start the season for her. And then when you think about, we've spoke about it before, and I'm sure we will throughout the season, like the depth in quality that Arsenal have. The fact that Kafaji and Agyemang are both out on loan at Brighton, for like those two playing together and getting regular minutes, that will be, for Arsenal, that's going to be huge next season or the season after. Both of them still very young. You perhaps you got obviously Smith and Kelly and Mead in those wider areas for Arsenal, and you wonder if Agyemang and Kafaji could potentially next season kind of start breaking into that squad, and maybe Mead or somebody will move on. But yeah, really great work from Brighton to get those two in on loan. But yet, I agree with you completely with Frank Kirby. Perhaps international football has maybe gone past her a little bit, and perhaps she decided to make that decision knowing and seeing kind of some of those younger players coming through, like Park and Beaver Jones and Clinton and Toon. Obviously for her, she's made that decision to retire from international football. But for Brighton, I think much like Paris is gonna, particularly early in the season, is gonna have a huge effect for London City. I think Kirby is definitely Brighton's most important player. And if she could stay fit, I think they could be kind of at the top of that kind of third group of teams down in the WSL who will be kind of chasing that kind of that sixth, seventh placings, and kind of, I wouldn't put it past them to be one of those teams fighting really hard for that kind of top half finish. Right?
Yeah, no,
Really, really
agreed.
impressive.
From that last game, yeah, they've got the potential to be really entertaining and compete this season. Chelsea won, Leicester 0. It's not often we speak about Chelsea towards the end, but Aggie Beaver Jones scored a goal to make it 3 goals in 3 games.
She must be better than Bunny Shaw. Must be.
You were watching, boy. No, she's looking good though. She's really coming on. This last year, she's got more established herself as a regular player for Chelsea. You can see her improving.
I think what I took away from that game, firstly, Cuthbert's backheel assist for Beaver Jones' goal was absolutely brilliant, because that ball was rattled into her pretty quick. 3 players around there. She had no right to get a pass away, but she did. For me, so that assist really, really stood out. So Leipzig in Leicester's goal made some really good saves, 2 in particular in that first half. But really, what I took away is Chelsea perhaps not their best in the final third, but considering he's got that interim job so late on, Rick Passmore has that Leicester City team really, really well organised, and I don't know how much of that was kind of always intended to be the game plan before they changed manager. I mean, I think I've said to you, I felt that Matt Beard was probably nailed on to get that job on a permanent basis. But obviously, the performance against Liverpool with a clean sheet, only conceding 1 against Chelsea away from home. Like I said, for me, what I've taken away from that is he's got that team really well organised. And whilst they probably are just about still favourites for relegation this season to finish bottom of the WSL, there is a lack of quality in the squad. I think particularly in forward areas. If in 91st minute they had their best chance to win the game. I think Ayane was offside anyway when she hit the crossbar. But if you in the 91st minute are still within a shout of taking a point or 3 points against Chelsea or any if you can do that against Chelsea, you can do that against any team in the WSL. And if you can be in games in the 90th minute in the WSL and you can pick up points here and there, they might surprise a few people. But what they definitely will do, and we've already witnessed this with Liverpool, they will cause teams problems because of how well organised they are and how hard they work.
Yeah, you make a good argument, and I think Leicester, they're in with a chance. I mean, they can play like that consistently. They've got every chance of survival. And I think going on to Erin Cuthbert, another one that again isn't, I wouldn't say underrated, but like goes under the radar because she's not some fancy foreign name, not big signing, but she's always been there consistently for years, and she always plays regularly, gets regular first team action, and it just shows you that. And Emma Hayes, Sonia and Pastor, both well credited managers. They know what they're doing, and both always, big fans of Erin Cuthbert. So I think a great player that sometimes doesn't quite get the praises that maybe she deserves.
I think probably a big part of that is she doesn't play for a nation that gets to very many major finals. And I know you and I have talked about this online and offline. I still personally think that the international game is driving women's football. It's why, in terms of the setup of women's football, I wouldn't 100% be opposed to a Super League type competition for women's football right now. It's why I was open to not having relegation in the WSL for now. Not forever, but I do think that international football and international competitions definitely do drive the popularity of the women's game. And for her, again, we saw in women's Ballon d'Or this week, Caroline Weir was nominated but finished 30 of the top 30, and you wonder if players like her and Cuthbert, like I said, because they play for a national team that perhaps doesn't get to as many international tournaments as they would like, whether some of that lack of appreciation for them as players stems from that, possibly.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really fair point. I generally think you're right. I think that does play into it. Our last game, there'll not be a lot to talk about. And surprisingly, Man United Arsenal, which of all games you'd have thought there would be stuff to talk about, but it was quite a dry affair. But Man United nil, Arsenal nil. Man United had 3 shots on target, and Arsenal had 1 shot on target. 2 highlights of the game were a fingertip save from Tullis Joyce and Man United. No surprise, top keeper, and Van Domsler also made a great save. And anything you'd like to add to those highlights of that game?
Olivia Smith smashing the crossbar for about 20 minutes into the game. I think very similar to her opening day goal that, was making the rounds on the highlight shows and the highlight reels and online. If she'd done that again, you'd say, wow. But yeah, it was a really, really dull affair. And it was obviously like the game that was getting I guess you'd say, the marquee slot for the day. Well, not just the hype, but like I said, it was getting the marquee slot kickoff time for the day. It was on BBC. I think BBC showed it, so it was free to air here in the UK. Anybody could have watched it. I think you probably look at Arsenal and maybe ask more questions of them, because United played during the week. I think you could probably argue that the squad isn't, in terms of depth of quality, as good as Arsenal's. But yeah, I think I'd probably look more to Arsenal there and say you had a really good chance to go take some points. Well, to take more points away from home from one of your, rivals for a European spot. You wonder if perhaps later on in the season it could be fairly decisive once everybody's kind of played each other a bit more. Obviously, you won't see it in the table now, but we've already talked about Mark Skinner and kind of the turnaround that he's had in terms of winning fans over, creating that team. I think under circumstances that maybe some people don't necessarily give him the credit for. I saw an interview with Grace Clinton this week, I think it was Sky Sports, and they asked her why she had made that move to City, and her response was essentially, well, they invest in their women's team. And I think that was kind of a dig at United, in the fact that definitely there are some people in the leadership of the club that don't really pay attention. And so, for me, under those circumstances, you wonder if perhaps Skinner doesn't get the recognition he deserves. For example, if for any reason Serena Wiegman was an England manager next month, you'd look around at the English coaching contingent, and you'd have to say the job that he did at Birmingham was exceptional. Had I think a pretty decent spell out in the States, and I think he's done pretty good to build United, albeit on good foundations left by Casey Stoney. You'd have to say he would be one of those that possibly be at kind of definitely should get an interview with the FA. But yeah, it was a bit of a dull game. Not much went on. 0-0. Yeah. A bit of a letdown, really. considering the quality it was there. And like I said, for me, I'd probably look. I think Arsenal would maybe look at themselves and say, "Got a good chance there with United playing midweek. We had a good chance there to get some points and to keep momentum going." Obviously, like a point away from home, in most instances, you take that against a good team like United. But under the circumstances, you wonder if Arsenal maybe would have gone away a bit disappointed.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was probably more lost for Arsenal, points lost. Is a conclusion of game week 3. Thank you for your time, Ross. Until in a few days' time for game week 4.
We gonna? Do you want to talk about Ballon d'Or?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Please go on.
So I'm going to be an old man about this.
Go on.
I am not a big fan of like individual awards,
Yeah.
and I think particularly the way this award works, voted by journalists around the world.
It's a mixture of journalists, players.
I don't think players are involved. I think it is just journalists that vote for this. But obviously it's become a big deal, and I think that's great for the players. I think the players really do like the Ballon d'Or. I think there is definitely, in terms of boosting profile, and I think in terms of players' individual kind of sponsorship deals, I think there's some financial incentives for winning this award. But I think personally, and I'm going to sound both like an old man going, we shouldn't be giving out individual awards in a team game. But like, Bonmati is a great player. And for her to win it 3 years in a row, brilliant. Yeah. I personally don't think she deserved to win it this year.
No,
yeah, like the whole point of it is not who is the best player, but who has been the best player in a specific time frame. And I think Caldente, I think Russo, I think a few Arsenal players could be a bit disappointed about not getting that award. I think Alessia Russo, possibly kind of front runner. Like at the end of the day, like it's always going to be an attacking player or attacking minded player. Very rarely you're going to see a defender or really win it. That's what makes Lucy Bronze such a freak. But for me, I thought this season, I think if you're an English player, you could be quite disappointed. An English team won the Champions League, the national team won the Euros, beating Bonmati Spain in the final, and doing that away, winning a major tournament away from England for the first time. I think they were all really huge achievements, and I think her winning it, she is a great player, don't get me wrong. She probably is the best player in the world. Do I think she was the best player in the last 12 months? Probably not. And I wonder if perhaps there are some people who were voting for that award who perhaps went on name recognition rather than potentially knowing what players have done throughout the year.
I think that's correct. I think there's no taking away from Bonmati's talent. If you watch her, she's the linchpin of the Spanish team. She's vital.
Awesome.
An English team won the Champions League, as you say. England won the European Championship. So in all senses, in any normal Ballon d'Or year, it would be an English player. So Russo could probably walk away from that and feel a bit hard done by and disappointed. Yeah. Because what more can you do? Bonmati hasn't won, national with her national team, hasn't won the Champions League, but I can understand why English player would be disappointed. What has an English player got to do to win it? So,
well, I mean, I would go that far. Like, it makes it sound like no English players ever won it. I just think this season, I wonder if some of those journalists, I'm looking at the rankings now. Bonmati, Caldente, like 3 of the top 4 were Spanish players, and I just look at it and I just go, like, Barcelona lost the Champions League final. They lost the European Cup final, like the European final internationally, and then you've got Alessia Russo, like highest ranked player who won both of those medals, coming third. Chloe Kelly was in 5th, Leah Williams in 7th, and Lucy Bronze and Hannah Hampton rounding out the top 10. But yeah, I mean, I think it's great. There's 1, 2, 3, 5 of the top 10 were English, and I think that's fully deserved. But yeah, I mean, and like you, not to take away from Bonmati as a player, you know, I think she probably is the best women's player in the world. But has she been? I think if you had said to somebody, you know, beforehand, like the winner this year will have lost the Champions League final, lost the European final, and will be ranked higher than players who had won both of those. I think people would kind of be surprised if you did it blind like that. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I think to take some positive, like I said, 5 of the top 10 English players, you know, and that's great. Great, massive Spanish representation in the top 10 too. So you can see why those teams would be heading into the World Cup as 2 of the probably 4 favourites, I think. But yeah, I was a bit disappointed by it, a bit gutted. I thought maybe Russo, you know, after having such a good domestic season last season, particularly not totally being in favour with the previous manager, I personally think she's made a huge step in her individual game under Renee Slagers, and yeah, I think she could be a bit disappointed. But obviously, shout out to Serena Wiegman, who won Coach of the Year as well, and
Deserved.
I think so. I think when you look, like we mentioned it last year, you know, she gets to finals or she wins finals in international football. Every tournament she's been to, she's got to the final and won 3 of the 5, I think. So you know, that is an amazing achievement. Now I guess what you hope is that translates to a World Cup win, the Lionesses, in a couple of summers' time. You know, purely from a selfish perspective there, but yeah. So it was great for her, but yeah, you know, I've said Bonmati's a great player, but I thought maybe Alessia Russo could be a bit disappointed this year not to be recognised.
I think you've summarised it perfectly. Okay, Ballon d'Or done. Any last points to raise before we conclude today?
No, I'm good.
Okay, that's it. We're signing off game week 3. And until next time, game week 4, listeners, and we'll see you on the other side.